Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are all over the world, and welcome to Prequel, Origin Stories and Inflection Points, a Goodie Nation podcast. I am Casey Willis, and I am a 2023 Goodie Nation Storytelling Fellow, and I'm also the founder of Could Be Pretty Cool, a podcast production company based in Atlanta. We are joining you today for part 2 of our very special series, introducing you to our amazing 2023 Google for Startups founders. We are so happy to have this partnership with Google because they introduce us to some of the most amazing entrepreneurs and founders all over the country, all over the world. And of course, Goodie Nation exists to bridge relationship gaps for promising founders all over the country and all over the world. And we do that by having mentorship sessions and coaches and pods and having opportunities for founders to be able to connect with one another. And it's so important for us to be able to do this work because so many founders deserve the support. And this podcast, Prequel, Origin Stories and Inflection Points, is hopefully a way for you to make a connection between the sort of starting off origin stories of some incredible people. And hopefully you'll hear something that resonates with you and you can help them along their journey as well. And so we're going to jump into it. We have a great show for you today. And our first founder that we are going to introduce you to is Zara. Zara, what is your founder origin story?
Great question. I think I have multiple answers for this. So I think first, when I was about 12 years old, I learned to program right after the iPhone was released. So back in the day. And at the time, I was like, I loved building apps. And I was like, I want to someday found a company. And we're going to be a giant technology company. I had this like caught the startup bug early. And then life happened. And so then years went by, I went through college. I tried to startup in college and kind of wasn't the right fit. And then I got a job. And so after college, I was working at Google. I worked on the assistant team and then was doing threat intelligence. And we were tracking state-sponsored hacking and disinformation. And I absolutely loved it. The mission couldn't be cooler. I loved the work. But then, and I didn't expect to be leaving. I wasn't ready to leave. But my co-founder, Arjun, reached out and he told me about his idea. And he's like, hey, do you know anyone technical who'd be willing to talk to me about this and be a potential co-founder? And we talked about his idea. And he's like, I want to take this open source world of data from like news to social media to dark web data and make it actionable. And this is weirdly the exact technical problem I'm working on as like, how do we understand large scale systems of text? I love that the mission, that there's an opportunity to provide help teams mitigate risk, help kind of combat bad actors, make sense of the world's data. And so I kind of fell in love with the problem. And then also it was that weird serendipitous moment where I was like, I have two co-founders, we have different skill sets, we have different backgrounds, but similar values. And so it really was a situation where I was like, I can't really say no to, I've always wanted to do this. And so I jumped into it last summer and haven't looked back. And it's been a lot of fun and chaos since then.
So I love that phrase. I fell in love with the problem. That's a very interesting way to look at one's entrepreneurship and founder journey. And so you said you jumped into this just last summer. So this is like a relatively new venture for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Very
I think a year, 12 months or so, 13.
Very cool. Very cool. Yes, we're so happy to have you here as a part of Goodie Nation. And how can people learn more about you and data is like everywhere and so many people need to get some data solutions happening. How can they learn more about you and about your company?
Yeah, the easiest is our website. So we're at overwatchdata.ai, and you can kind of see a bit more about what we're doing for fraud teams or supply chain risk, or kind of even more global intelligence who are trying to help combat bad actors on their platform. You can also find me at LinkedIn. I'm Zara Perumal if you search my name. I'm one of the few or only. And yeah, I'd love any feedback, or as we're building it out, we're excited to always get thoughts from other people.
Very nice. Yes, we need some data warriors out here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Maria, why don't you tell the folks listening and watching this your founder origin story?
Yes, so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Maria. I was born in Colombia and I moved to the US when I was 10. I was always really good at math and science, so I thought to myself, I'm going to be an engineer. I I was, working with all my friends and their siblings on their own math problems and science problems ever since I was in middle school. And I just really enjoyed spending time with kids and, at that point, a lot of my friends. But what I realize now is that time that I was spending teaching math and science wasn't just about that. It was about like holding space and being there for people in a way that filled me in a lot of different aspects of my life. So I ended up going to Stanford to do my undergrad in mechanical engineering. I thought I was going to build airplanes and spaceships for a living. And I started on that career path. So I worked at GE, I worked at Boeing, and I felt a little empty inside. I was touring all these airplanes and like getting to see all these really cool things that I dreamed about my whole life, but it wasn't enough. And I found myself really looking forward to these tutoring sessions that I was having with kids. In one of those sessions, I remember we were sitting in the Stanford campus with a middle school kid. His name is Jose, and I was talking about like, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? What are you looking forward to? And he's like, well, I'm going to be a mechanic. I'm like, that's amazing. Why do you want to be a mechanic? He's like, well, my brother's a mechanic, my dad's a mechanic, my sister's boyfriend's a mechanic, so I'm going to be a mechanic too. I'm like, that's amazing. And have you thought about considered any other options? He's like, no, why would I do that? I'm like, well, have you heard about Mark Zuckerberg? And he's like, what? Who's that? Who's that? And like, this is at the time when um, Facebook was opening their offices in East Palo Alto, and this is where Jose lived. And it was this moment of sort of realization that, I could spend my whole life teaching math and science to kids, but there was still so much missing. And it really was about sort of creating awareness and opening people's minds in a way that they hadn't really seen before. So I was like, wait, do I want to be in education? And basically completely changed my career path 3 months before graduating. My parents love that. But it all just made sense, right? I thought about going into the classroom, and then I met the founder of this new company that was popping up. They were working on like how to make technology usable in the classroom. Like iPads were just coming out and teachers were like, this thing is really cool, but like, what do I do with it? And how does it work? And how do I teach with it? So Nearpod at the time created what we lovingly called PowerPoint on steroids, where you could broadcast different data or content to the student's device and give the teachers the ability to control what was on the kid's screen, and have formative assessments, interactive activity, all these things. And it was so powerful to see at the core, like somewhat simple technology have such a big impact in the classroom. And I got hooked. So that's where I got caught my startup bug and my entrepreneurship bug. And that was my startup bootcamp. I joined that team. I learned how to build a company, how to market it, how to sell products, how to build a product, do so many things, and how to build an education, right? How to build a product that kids really wanted to use, that teachers would make time for, knowing that their teachers have so much that they're holding, and that administrators could pay for, right? Because there's a lot of requirements, and we want to make sure that they're meeting those. So that journey took me into sort of the lives of kids and the lives of schools. And then I ended up leaving the education space in January 2020. So, you probably all remember where you were in those 3 months. I joined a new company in the HR technology space. I was really excited. They had like new technology to visualize inequities in workplaces and be able to sort of address some of the challenges that I had seen in Nearpod as a growing company. So I joined them right after they raised their seed round from Andreessen as their head of marketing. I'm like, great, we're going to take over the world. This is awesome. And then a pandemic happens. So, lots of unforeseen events there. At the core, it was such a gift to be able to witness the pandemic through the eyes of HR. You see of course, the shift to remote work, and then the increase in emphasis on DEI and equity in the workplace. And then we get to the need for employee engagement and mental health. And when we start looking at mental health, we start seeing all these companies are doing incredible work, like Barrera and Lyra and Ginger, Modern Health. They're all growing up to support adults in the workplace, but I don't see much for kids. And then going back to my Nearpod experience, I'm like, well, of course the pandemic is affecting all of us in some way, shape, or form, but for kids, it's just so different to not have school and not have a structure and not be socially interacting with other people, and to feel this, never-ending anxiety of what's going to happen with the world. All of those things they're affecting everybody, but for kids, it's just my hypothesis was like it was going to hit different. And spoiler alert, I was right. And as I started doing some research on that, the true inflection point was this article I read in the New York Times about the rising suicide rates in 8-year-olds. That's 8-year-olds. And it broke me, right? Like, how is it that 8-year-olds, one, know what suicide is, but two, are able to carry on with such a destructive and painful process because they're hurting so badly. So with that, that moment, I quit my job and I decided I needed to do something about it. And I spent the next 4 months talking to people, trying to figure out what I could do, how I could help, where there was an opportunity, what was needed out there, and ultimately landed on sort of three core big needs. One, we have a lot of mental health supports out there, but there is a big gap for systems and resources that are built for kids themselves, right? So we're not really designing for this generation that like wants everything on demand and is sort of on their phones 24/7. So one, how do we build something that's for kids? Two, as I talked to different psychologists, they kept on saying like, by the time a kid gets to me, there's so much more that has to be undone than anything you can do in the prevention side could have 10x the impact. So really focused on prevention. And then third, realize that there's not enough mental health professionals out there. So how can we create a whole new layer of the workforce to support kids in a way that hasn't been done before? So all those learnings are ones that we're taking into the work that we're doing today. And the key part of this is we partner with schools to both be the financial and the distribution partner. So they're paying for it so it can be accessible to every kid, regardless of disposable income. And it can also be something that every kid can have access on their phone without needing to like fill a long form or go through a whole process. And we've been around for a year and a half and been, as one kid says, like changing and saving lives since. And it's all because, I look back now growing up and tutoring I did, and so much of that was like, those were coaching sessions, right? I was talking to my friends about the boy drama or the pressures with family or anything that was going on. And it's now so powerful to be able to take that aspect of myself and sort of scale it across all these wonderful people who are coaches and reach thousands of kids across the US.
Amazing how we go from tutoring the students in math and science to a holistic approach to their lives and education through mental health. Like the connecting of dots is very cool and very necessary work, as we all know right now. Maria, how can someone who is interested in Clayful learn more about the company, learn more about you, connect with you if this is something that they're looking for?
yeah, we are the best place is our website as well. So clayfulhealth.com. And we also post a lot of our strategies on Instagram and LinkedIn. So follow us there and you'll get to learn the same things that we're teaching middle school and high schoolers. But like I learn about all these strategies every single week. I'm like, oh, I need that too. Save. So make sure to follow us there so you can learn along with us.
Nice. The journey of learning never ends, always learning.
Yep.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And finally, we have Nick. Nick, what is your founder origin story?
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you both for sharing your powerful stories. I love seeing women in STEM, women of color, leading great organizations like you all are. Great to be here with everybody today. I'm Nick Freeman, the co-founder and chief growth officer with Innovare, where we empower education leaders via our app to use data and insights effectively to positively impact their students and communities. So my story on how I got into the space is a little roundabout process. I'm born and raised on the south side of Chicago in Hyde Park. Grew up in a very privileged space that gave me access to quality public education, support system, and access to those extracurricular activities, whether it be our sports leagues or swim teams, that allowed for me to kind of see what the power of community and collective impact really was. My background is actually in finance. I have an MBA, I have a master's in finance, a Series 766. All of those things that, kind of along that path, I was told to do, right? Go to school, go to college, get a degree. But it was, without the experiences that of, working in those spaces and seeing those environments, that unfortunately, when I got into that space, I didn't have a passion for it, right? I come from a space where my mom was an early childhood teacher, ended up leading the district in the Office of Early Childhood in Chicago Public Schools. My dad was corporate and military, so obviously kind of gives you a sense of the direction in the finance path. But I didn't, have, there was also a community that I grew up around, right? It was about those other family members and other community members, whether it was the corner store owner or the police officers or the fire people, who were really bought into, raising a community together. And in that finance space, unfortunately, it was very white male dominated, not inclusive, not supportive. Folks weren't coming from the backgrounds and lived experiences that I had. So all of the credentials that I had never allowed for me to, become one in that space as well. And nor did I want to become one in that space. So much to didn't know what I was going to do next, up and quit my job. Decided, I didn't have the passion to be in that space any longer. And, it was actually the best decision I made. Ended up falling into the education space. Knowing I come from a measurement and data background, I was able to get a role in Chicago Public Schools as a data strategist, working in the network in Inglewood Gresham, where, just 5 minutes away from where I grew up, and had access to quality public education, which unfortunately was not the case for the 40 or 50 schools that I was supporting when I started in the district. So really, it was eye-opening to me, the privilege that I grew up with, whether it be quality public education or the diversity and inclusion that was really in the space. But these were the schools that folks that I grew up with and we were playing sports together, that they had access to, right? And it just didn't make sense to me, right? It wasn't one school, it wasn't two schools, it wasn't 10 schools. It was all of our low income, Black and brown, our students that had diverse learning needs, our English language learners that consistently were getting the short end of the stick. And what we really recognize is that our leaders weren't being empowered with the technologies specifically centered around data and strategic planning. So while I was in Chicago Public Schools, something that I've always valued are, people who are experts in their field, right? And I'm a lifelong learner. I continue to kind of grow in my approach and really wanting to, become more empathetic in how we design solutions for partners. But I know I need other experts at the table. So while I was in Chicago Public Schools, one of my co-founders now, AJ, who's our Innovare CEO, comes from a strong educational background, really understands the strategy component that comes along with it and the educational expertise. He and I really saw value in one another, not only because of the skill sets that we brought to the table, but just because of who we were and what we stood for and what we really wanted to do in the education space. So after seeing, how we could intentionally collaborate and bring our leadership together, our teams together to to use data more effectively, to strategize more effectively, to communicate with community stakeholders more effectively. We saw that there was a potential. Well, I'll give that to shout out to AJ. He was actually a part of the Surge Institute Fellowship Program. Carmita Saman is the leader of that organization, who has been a huge support for us. But the capstone project that he had was actually the beginning of Innovare. So I always tell folks, he Jerry Maguired me onto this journey, right? Where we now, collectively have come together, he and I and his brother Fernando, who actually was working at Google at the time, came on and built a technology where we saw the ability to use technology the same way that our private industries, our medical industries, our transportation, our finance industries use data. They use technology to really drive strategies, right? So for us, like, we know what the insights tell us about the outcomes, especially for our communities, our low income, our communities of color. It's 30 proficiency rates are our national average, right? And when you look at Black and brown kids, there's a significant gap there as well. And our belief is, if we use technology more effectively to get insights in the hands of our leaders and our teachers more quickly and effectively, they will be able to provide an even higher quality of service than that they do now, right? So we know also that we play the role of a guide in this space, right? That's probably my favorite part of the work that I'm able to do now, is really centered around how we elevate the brand and the awareness of the great work that our education leaders are doing, right? We're a guide to they're the heroes in this journey, right? So anything that we can do to continuously bring forth the efforts and resources for our leaders to more effectively tell their data stories, that's what we're about. So for the journey that, AJ, Fernando, and I have come along, right? I'll kind of speak towards, what really drove us to this. It's the team that we surrounded ourselves with, right? We all come from various backgrounds, but we all have a vision and a belief and values for one another that we will achieve, and we know how to. And secondly, we believe the problem that we're solving is a problem that has to be addressed. We understand that, our access to quality education privileged us to be in a situation that we are today. So we are big believers and supporters of the community around education, any way that we can elevate and continue to impact and tell that effective data story, and an equitable data story at most, right? So again, it's been a long journey, but again, I know I didn't come along this path on my own. Again, surrounding myself with those partners, with those other folks that carry expertise as well, has been something that, has allowed us to be as successful as we are.
Amazing. I just, for all the folks listening, wherever you are, I want you all to know that the curation of these podcast episodes, there's no particular science to it, right? We're just like, who has availability when, and like, that's when you come and do it. But the fact that these three folks are the ones who ended up being on this show just goes to show you, like, I mean, the similarities between, mission and using tech and data to help people in education, and falling in love with the problem and loving the part. Like, this is just like a really cool group of folks. So Nick, how can people find out more about you and about Innovare?
Awesome. Well, yes, as always, our website at innovaresip.com. Also on all of the social channels, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, at innovaresip. We're consistently staying engaged, building that, interactive community. So please, reach out to us on LinkedIn. And, I felt the exact same way, right? When I was hearing the stories of the other two founders on here today, I thought you all had curated it, to be completely honest with you. and that's the intentionality. And I think that's just the power of community. And, I just, again, appreciate you all elevating the work that we're all doing.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. That is why we exist. That is why Goodie Nation as an organization exists. We know, and we've seen the power of just getting folks together in the room, sharing perspective, sharing stories, sharing origin stories, and the why and the how. Those connections are incredibly powerful. And if you happen to be listening to this right now and go, oh, you know what? I need to put Zara in contact with this person I know, or you know what, I need to invite one of them to come speak on this panel that I'm doing. That's exactly what I'm looking for. It only takes a minute, 2 minutes to send an email, to send a message on LinkedIn. that small intentional act could potentially be the thing that takes one of these founders to the next level. And that's what we're doing. We are bridging those relationship gaps. And so I'm so grateful for you all sharing your stories today. This has been yet another amazing Prequel Origin Stories and Inflection Points podcast. And as our Goodie Nation founder, Joey Womack, always says, stay magnetic and outwork yesterday. Thank you for listening.